Yeah. So what's the history of Protestant? Where does the name even come from, Matthew?
It's so funny because this often happens in history. Sometimes the names that we receive and just wear, as a badge often come from those who didn't like us to begin with.
Right.
And that's the case with so many labels in history. Sometimes the word was used originally to say, "Oh, those Protestants, those people who are protesting," and in many ways, the name is acceptable, but it doesn't quite capture everything that the Protestants were after. It tends to give the impression that our fathers were just protesters. There was some truth to that. Who can forget, right? Luther's frustration, pastoral frustration with indulgences, and so much more, or abuses and authority in the papacy, and so on. At the same time, though, Luther would have been the first one to say, we are not just protesting, but we are obedient servants. There's a great phrase from the historian Jaroslav Pelikan, who says, there was, yes, this Protestant principle that we know so well. Sometimes you hear it in the five solas. But there was also a Catholic substance that was absolutely essential to what it meant to be Protestant. And I think Luther, despite his very loud and noisy irritation at Rome, at the same time, Luther would have been mortified if someone would have said to him, "You are not Catholic." There's this, it's not just Luther. Calvin felt the same way. There's this great quote by historian Bruce Gordon in his biography of Calvin, where he says, if Calvin would have heard those words that he was not Catholic, well, he might have tore his hair out.
Right.
In other words, what all these historians are trying to communicate is that the Reformers did not see themselves as less Catholic, or Catholicity, if we could use that word, than their opponents, but perhaps even more so, which sometimes irritated their opponents. I think a great example of this, if listeners are thinking, okay, I give lots of examples in my book, but a great example of this is take a trip over to the Swiss. Think of a reformer, Heinrich Bullinger, who is Zwingli's successor. One of the things that he does, he's very eager to create unity between the reformers. And so one of the things he does is he begins to preach and write, and out of his preaching and writing comes this emphasis on what he called the Holy Catholic Church. You can see this in what we call his decades. One of them, the fifth one, so this is 1551, but the fifth decade, it's the title says it all. Here's the title: Is the Reformation a departure from the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, as Rome claimed, or is the Reformation a proper, albeit evangelical, renewal of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church? And Bullinger takes that question head on, and he says, no, we are an evangelical renewal of that one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, despite what Rome is telling you. So that was quite central to what it meant to be Protestant. Yes, they're protesting, but for them, that did not mean a throwing off of the church before them in its totality, but rather a renewal of that church in its best and proper sense.
Yeah.